So here we've got this hierarchy. At the very top are what I've called the real gods. There are either none of these if you're an atheist, one of these if you're a monotheist, or many of these if you're a polytheist or very confused. So they've got the real gods, and the real gods created our universe. And in that universe there are real people, us, bound by the physical laws. So we have to do whatever the gods decided was possible. We can't do anything the gods didn't decide was possible because it's not programmed into our world. So we can only change physics by appealing to the gods. So, oh man, I'm late for a lecture. Maybe if I prayed, I could get teleported there. Well, worth a shot. Oh, it didn't work this time. Then you've got real world governments. These are the people who set the real world laws which moderate what's physically possible to be what's socially desirable. So it's physically possible for me to knock people over in my car, socially undesirable to do so, so the lawmakers, the governments, restrict what I'm allowed to do by bringing laws out against it. And they will use physical laws, physical force, to stop me from doing it if I do it. The real world governments, they apply laws to virtual world developers because they're just members of the public like everybody else. So they're bound by real world governmental laws. The virtual world developers, though, are gods. They create virtual worlds. And in the virtual worlds, people are playing. They're playing through characters, and the characters are bound by the virtual world's physics. So if you're a player and something happens in a game that you don't like, this is your hierarchy. First of all, you appeal to the developer. Say, look, I think I should be allowed to loot this corpse, but it isn't letting me loot the corpse. And the developer says, yeah, well, I don't want you to do that. I don't like you. So the next thing to do is to appeal to the developer's government. This guy here has developed this game and it's unfair. I should be allowed to loot this corpse. He's not let me do it. Send a policeman round, tell him to do it. And the government says, oh, he's got a point, you know, you are a bit of a suck. So then his next aim is to say, okay, well, in that case, I'm going to pray to the people in charge of the real world. Maybe they'll change the real world in such a way that it will enable the government to change their mind in such a way they'll tell the developer to change his mind, and then I'll loot the corpse until you pray, and then, oh no, the real gods think that I suck as well. Maybe I shouldn't get it. So that's the hierarchy, how it works. But players can themselves form governments. What is a guild if not a government? Somebody's in charge and they decide who's in and who's out and what the rules apply within that guild. So they operate within the physical laws of the game world. So if you're only allowed 25 people on a raid and 26 people want to go on it, they can't add a 26th except by appealing to the gods or the government or the real gods. So this is the basic relationship. You've got a world created by gods. Inside the world are people, and you've got governments who are made up of people, and they govern citizens who are also people. In a virtual world, it's like this. You've got the real world with 0, 1, or many gods created by. Inside the real world, you've got real people with real world governments who are governing real world citizens, of whom some are developers, some are players, and some are these non-gamer types. The developers create, because they're gods, a new world which is part of this, but it's a virtual world. The players pretend it's distinct from the real world, but it's actually part of the real world. Because if these people decide they don't want it, it's not there. If these people decide they don't want it, it's not there. If these people decide they don't want it, it's not there. If these people don't play it, it's there but empty. Inside the virtual world, you can have you can have virtual world governments who are governing virtual world citizens. So this is how it is. So it's wrong to say that a virtual world developer is a government, because they're not a government. They're a god. They operate through physics. Somebody has to operate through the physics. It has to be a government. You can't be a government and a god. If this government here decides to tell these developers how to create, then suddenly the developers aren't creating, the government's creating. And they're the gods, whether they like it or not. So you always have to have a god to create a virtual world. Even if you don't want to be the god, somebody's got to be it, because otherwise you can't create it. Somebody has to control the physics. So it really does come down then to, if you don't like it, don't play it. If you don't like reality, it's difficult to change to another reality because we only know of one. So, hey, this reality sucks. I'm going to a reality where I can fly. Yeah, well, good luck with that. Yeah. Because if you kill yourself off and you've made a bad decision, then you might find you're not actually going to another reality. In fact, you might not exist anymore. So it's very difficult for us in reality to switch to another reality. No one's yet come back from having done it. But in a virtual world, it's very easy. You can switch from one MMO to another MMO quite easily. Bit of a pain, because you wave goodbye to your friends or take them all with you, or whatever, but you can do that. I did have a double dashed line, though, between the players and the characters, which I'll come back to later if I've still got time, which makes it a bit different. But we'll see why shortly. So designers, if they wanted to, could create a world as oppressive and unfair as they liked. Because if players don't like it, they don't have to play. So all the human rights violations they put in that game, if people don't like it, they don't have to play. Which makes it a lot easier to explain away human rights violations. If I wanted to set a game in a gulag, I should be able to do that, surely. It doesn't affect you that I set a game in a gulag, it only affects the players, and if they know it in advance and they start playing it, surely they're okay with that. Now, user-created content is something that's generally touted as a big thing for virtual worlds, yet I've just described the designers as having the whip hand. They're the ones who are the gods. The players are merely visitors to their worlds. So the players don't have as much power as the gods. And yet user-created content is usually put forward as being the big saviour for virtual worlds. What makes these things like Second Life so exciting? So it may seem odd, therefore, to rank this below the designers. Doesn't freedom of expression mean that players should be able to play however they like? Why should they be forced to play how the designers want them to play? Well, in theory, yes, players should be able to play however they want, but the problem is that your freedom of expression might stop me from playing the game that I was playing and having fun with. The reason for this is because although this is a big mistake, you hear a lot from lawyers in particular, when they talk about the players, they talk about them as if they were a unified group, all holding the same opinions. But they're not. They're different people and they have different opinions. Some of them even disagree with me. So the players is not a single group. The players is a disparate group of people with different views, and some want to play some ways and some want to play other ways, and that's part of the fun of the game, is allowing the multiple different player types to interact. I'd recommend you a paper, but I'm too modest to do so. In single-player games, all the rules to the games are coded into it. They're programmed in as part of the physics. So if you're playing a single-player game, there are no rules that aren't directly coded in. It's as if the laws of the land and the laws of nature were one and the same. So you're playing a single-player game. If the traffic light says red and the car lets you move, then you're allowed to do it. If the traffic light says red and the car won't let you move, you can't do it because the physical universal law says you can't move. In the real world, it's merely human convention and the threat of police action that stops you from going through a red light in a car. So a single-player game, people play these single-player games, and anything the game lets them do is fair from their point of view. Now, in massively multiplayer games, there are other rules which are not coded in. For example, you can stop people using swear words. This is a game, we want people who are young to play this. We don't want you using swear words. We're not going to let you use any swear words. Any swear words we will blot out with asterisks. You can stop that, but you can't stop people inventing new swear words. America Online put in a swear word filter. Stop people from using any swear words at all, under any circumstances. And if you came from the English town of Scunthorpe, you couldn't play It wouldn't let you log in to America Online. You had to say you came from a different place. You had to invent a place, Scunthorpe. Why wouldn't you let to play if you came from Scunthorpe? Because these letters here are rude in English. And America Online didn't want people doing that, so they stopped people from saying they came from Scunthorpe. And the people who came from Scunthorpe, there's about 200,000 people live there, complained, and over time, the American Online people said, okay, we are looking a bit stupid here, so let's allow people to use the word Scunthorpe. As soon as they did, people started using it as a swear word. So, you can prevent, there are some laws that you can code out, but you can't code out everything. There are some things which you just have to let the players themselves do. They have to have their own magic circle that they build themselves. The game itself can't hold all the laws. For single-player games, it can. Because even in a single-player game, you might decide that you're not going to use a particular strategy because it's no fun, so you might play a different way. In a multiplayer game, you might agree with 3 or 4 people to play it a certain way. You don't want to play with Zerg rushes or something in a Age of Empires, so nobody does it. In a game with thousands of players, it's very hard to get everybody to agree with this, so somebody has to kick out the ones who are playing badly. Some players will only play by the coded-in rules. They say that whatever the game allows, that means that I can do it, and I will do it, and it doesn't matter what anybody else says. If the game lets me do it, then it must be allowed. They'll say, when you complain to them about it, that, hey, it's freedom of expression, I'm just playing differently. I'm not playing wrongly, I'm playing by rules, it's just not the same rules as everybody else. And that's within my rights to do it. As human being, I've got my own rights to freedom of expression. But what if my fun in playing that game depends on your moderating that expression? Do I not have some freedom somewhere not to have to listen to somebody whose freedom of expression involves reciting the words to Kylie Minogue songs, even if it's Kylie Minogue? So if I'm playing a game and somebody else is being freely expressive in a manner that disrupts my play, is that some kind of human rights law thing? Well, no, but it's still important. And somebody could be applying a human rights law, like freedom of expression, to spoil a game. And if the game gets spoiled, everybody leaves, the person there has now got freedom of expression to speak to nobody. So by giving them their right, they've taken away what it was used for. If I've got a game set in the Three Musketeers period, everybody's out there shooting Cardinals' guards, and somebody comes in and says, well, what about that World Cup game, eh? Yeah, those Spaniards. Well, what can you do about it? You can say, look, this is a game about the Three Musketeers, can you go away? Hey, well just because you're not, you didn't win, did you? No, I didn't win. No, I was actually at the club jousting with another member of my guild, so you're spoiling my game here. You should be allowed to kick people out if you've got a game that's specifically about a particular subject and everybody who's playing there has signed up in the belief that it's not for the real world. So a real world right could be affecting a game. Gold farming, this is something that's important to virtual worlds. What happens with these is people play an MMORPG, they want something, they can't have it, it's going to cost them a lot of in-game currency, they can't be bothered to play or they don't have the time, so they buy it off a bunch of people in China who spend all day playing the game to get virtual currency, and then they go into the game and they pay for the object. Most games disallow that. They disallow it because it spoils the game. The game designers could give away any amount of gold for free. If you want 5,000 gold pieces, here, have it. If it wasn't a problem, they would do that. But it is a problem, so they don't do that. But if you're playing and you buy it from somebody who's there as a job, then you're spoiling the game for the other people who regard achievement as important within that game. So players can buy success. Most people don't like that. They think it's unfair. They should be able to be kicked out. But the gold farmers would just simply say, well, if you don't like it, don't play. If you don't like this game, you don't have to play it, go and play some other game. Well, the trouble is that you could be immensely wealthy. You could be Bill Gates, you could go off, you could design, build, set up your own other game, only invite people in who you like, who you think are going to behave wrongly, behave honourably, and then one of them decides to get greedy and turns into a gold farmer, and then they've effectively followed you. You can't get rid of it. It's like a pollutant. Surely I should be able to stop people from what they regard as freedom of speech if that freedom of speech impacts on my play experience. This brings us to another issue, which is property. It's a huge area of MMO law. I'm not going to go into it very much here at all. I'm just going to scratch the surface. If you're lawyers and you're interested in looking at virtual worlds, this is another very fruitful area, particularly in Europe, because most of the people who've done work on this are Americans. They don't know about European laws, or in many cases, American laws. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 17.2, not that I've looked this up on Wikipedia, says that no one should be arbitrarily deprived of their property. Recently, a ship in EVE Online was attacked and destroyed along with its cargo. Its cargo consisted of 74 pilot license extensions, which, if you bought them from CCP, and some people had, were worth $1,295. So, you're playing a game, someone shoots your ship down, and they destroy property worth $1,295. Arbitrarily removed. Well, certainly removed, not arbitrarily necessarily, but it wasn't deliberate. No one deliberately took it away. They just shot the ship down. It happened to have it on there. But it was taken away for no reason. Surely they can ask for their money back. But in the game context, they were stupid carrying all those around in the same ship because they knew that a ship could get shot down. And it did. They were cheapskates. They should have put it in a huge, monstrous battleship or taken multiple small runs at once, but no. So the game there warns them that this can happen. It's like if you're playing poker and you lose money. Well, that's part of the game. You know, it's real money game, and you playing for real money, you lost real money. So taking property from people, even though it's prevented under universal human rights, is possible if, when you start to play, you're told up front it can happen, and then when it does happen, well, it's part of the game. This is a quest-related object from World of Warcraft, the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. It's a neural needler. Its use is it inflicts incredible pain to the target, but does no permanent damage. Yeah, it's like my dentist, except for without the permanent damage and without the no pain. Okay, the biggest question regarding virtual property is whose is it? So if you're interested in looking at anything to do with virtual property, the first thing you have to decide is who does the virtual property belong to? Developers will assert that it's theirs if indeed it's property at all. However, players treat it as if it was their property. They treat it as if it was regular, ordinary property. They feel like it's theirs, especially if they bought it for real money, which happens all the time in Second Life. I mean, that's legitimate. They don't stop you there. So if they think it's their real property, then maybe it is. It depends on which argument. If you use Locke's argument, then we created this. When I bought this box, there wasn't a level 80 battle mage in it. There is. I've got a level 80 battle mage, therefore it's there through the fruits of my labours, therefore it's mine. So what happens if the game allows people to steal property? Well, the real world doesn't let you steal property, but if you're playing in a game when the game allows you to steal property and it's your real property, even though it's virtual, you should be able to get it back, perhaps. There have been cases in China and Korea where people have been given virtual property back as a result of real world actions. Another right, which has nasty consequences for MMOs, is Article 27.2, which talks about the right to protection of the moral interests in your artistic creations. What this means is if you create something, you have the right of attribution. If I create a like a sculpture, then I have the right, whenever it's displayed, for it to say that it's by me. Integrity as well. This means that if I create a large piece of work and you only show a small piece of it, or if I create a large piece of work and you show it in out of context, then in a way that looks bad for me, then I can complain that it's undermining my artistic integrity. However, what this means is that if I build something, if I create some content in a virtual world, like build a little sculpture in a virtual world, and you publish a screenshot of it, then you've got to say it's mine, because I get the rights of attribution on that. And if you don't say it's mine, I can insist that you remove it. And that's for one screenshot. The virtual world itself is a stream, 24 frames per second, to every player of screenshots. So how many violations are there going on there the whole time? So it's a big issue here. Not in America, where they didn't actually sign up to that particular part of the Berne Convention, but for Europe that's a big issue. The way around it would seem to be that you declare joint copyright in it. But there's a lot more to virtual worlds and property. I'm not going to go into it here because I'm supposed to finish in about 2 minutes and I've got about 20 minutes for material, so I have to rush. Things to look at: nerfing virtual property, that's making it not do what it used to do. Closing failed virtual worlds in which people own materials. The effect of enforcing a property right in a virtual world could destroy that property's value. And sales versus service, that's to say, I'm not selling you the gold, I'm selling you the service of transferring the gold from my character to your character. The dashed line on the gods diagram was because the reason people play MMOs is to be and become themselves. They're trying to get to be their characters. It's the benefit of the game is a sense of identity. It's called immersion. You're playing, when people play virtual worlds, the main aim is to become immersed, which is for you and your character to become one entity. What that means is that what I've been saying previously about the difference, do it to character, you're not doing it to the player. Actually, if the player has become their character because they become so immersed in the game, if you do it to the character, you are doing it to the player. So you've removed this whole frame, and that's got consequences. Now, if I'm playing an educational game in which I am a slave, and I play it, and I know at the end of it I gain some insight into what it must have been like to be a slave. That's minor insight, because of course, really, you're not actually being chained up. If I was playing an MMO, if I'm immersed, then I would actually be suffering. Not the same level, no physical suffering. I wouldn't have all the irons and things and the lack of nutrition and so on, but I would be suffering emotionally quite a lot, because that's me in there, that's my character. But not my character, it's me, because I'm immersed. So players and characters can become one in MMOs after a long time. And that then means there's some of the things that we've been saying about human rights, separation of character and player, can be a problem. Before I talk about this, I need to discuss what I call the Covenant. And this picture here is of Wednesday Addams, out of the Addams Family TV show in the 1960s. The designer of an MMO does this. They set the fictional framework. They provide possible actions that you can do within the fictional framework. They give you a range of goals to do, quests, things to do within there. And they present events in such a way that players have to make decisions as to which goals to aim for and then which actions to undertake in order to achieve those goals. However, when you start to play a game, you can't be told all of this in advance, because if I tell you exactly what you're going to do before you start to play, I've just spoiled the game. So I can't say, look, this is a game which is going to involve you going out there and finding out that the wife of the guy you're trying to rescue is actually a lesbian, and she's got really over-controlling, and she's just killed everybody here, not because she's a lesbian, just because she's mad. And then these other guys, and you can't say this. I've just described a situation in Dragon Age, by the way. So you can't say this because it spoils the game for the players, as those of you who haven't played Dragon Age will now find when you play it. Branka is not the person you think she is. So it spoils the game if you tell people what's expected of them. So you can't say what is expected of them. All you can say is what boundaries there are. So if you don't know what the game fully involves, how can you decide whether to play it? You say, okay, if I don't like it, I don't play, but you won't tell me what's in it, so how do I know if I'm going to like it? So what happens is the designers create a set of expectations, general expectations of where the boundaries lie. Some of these are implicit because you know the genres, some of them are explicit, they say it on the box or in the title. So there's the moral expectations. This is not a game in which you can be expecting to be killing people. This is the genre. This is a game which involves much spacewalking and not a lot of deep-sea diving. This is the gameplay. You'll be doing a lot of puzzles here. You won't be doing a lot of button mashing. They covenant, which is to make a solemn promise with players that even though they don't know what's coming up, it will fall within those boundaries. So if we say this is a game which has got a bit of scary content but not much, and then people play it, it's got a bit of scary content but not much, okay, they were told that. For example, if you're told that this is a game about knitting and you start playing the game, you can't say, oh man, this game's full of knitting. Because you knew that, you shouldn't have played it if you didn't have knitting. However, you can complain if it involves stabbing people to death with knitting needles, because that should have been mentioned on the box. For games like MMOs, which have got a long future, you set the boundaries, but sometimes you want to change them because 5 years after you started, the circumstances have changed. So if you want to do that, you have to explain it outside of the game. For example, Star Wars Galaxies was losing players and it wanted to stabilize around combat. It had two types of player, those who liked to craft things, to make things, those who liked combat, to fight. If the only reason people would craft is to make things for people to fight with. If they took out the fighting, there was nothing to craft for. If they took out the crafting, there was still the fighting, so they took out the crafting. Lots of crafter players left, some of them switched to fighting. The game's now stabilized around fighting. They warned the players, look, we're going to make these changes. The players were up in arms, all the crafters didn't like it, all the crafters left, except for a few who went on to become fighters, but the fighters managed to, they stayed, they loved it, and now it's stable. So if you tell people in advance you're going to do it, that's fair enough. If they hadn't have told them and people just logged on and what happened to all my crafty stuff? Well, why have I got this sword? Well, that wouldn't have been fair. You have to tell people. If you want to break the covenant, you can do so within the game legitimately. So you can say this is a game in which none of these bad things happen, and then a bad thing happens. But you can do that if you're overstepping a boundary to establish it. Example, quest in World of Warcraft called Zen's Bidding. You have to go off and kill these creatures you know you're not really supposed to go and kill, but there's this nice reward. So you go off and kill them anyway, and then along come the authorities and they say, oh, you shouldn't have done that, and they tell you off and then make you go off and do another quest, which you then do, and then that involves humiliating the guy who gave you the first one. So you do some penitence to atone it. So now you know where the boundaries are. We won't be asking you to do any of these stupid things here, because if you do, then you won't be acting like you should do in this kind of situation. There's another quest in World of Warcraft called Army of the Damned, where you take on the role of the bad guy and you go slaughtering hundreds, in fact I think exactly 100, innocent good guys, just so that the bad guy who's given you this glimpse to his power can laugh at you and show you how insignificant you are. He's showing you how bad he is. So you're overstepping the mark, but there's a context to it which explains why it's happening, and it all makes sense. There is, however, a quest called the Art of Persuasion in the Wrath of the Lich King. This is where you're asked to torture a prisoner for information. If you're an alliance, there's two sides, the alliance and the horde. I've only ever played the alliance. So you hordes there, you can go off and suck cows or something, I don't care. The alliance players have never been asked to do anything bad like this before, ever. And suddenly there's this quest where you have to torture somebody. The people asking you to do the torturing, the Kirin Tor, they're not allowed to torture people. It's against our code. We can't torture people. However, if I give you this neural needler, you can torture them for us. Now, most of the people who played this didn't even give it a second thought. They just, oh, great, torture, okay, well, bam, bam, zap, 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 get the next quest stage, off I go. They didn't care at all. It's just a game. However, a significant number of people were dismayed, and I was one of them. I blogged about it and got 1,500 mad emails from crazy people. There are several explanations of why what happened there happened. It's a torture quest. I wasn't expecting to have to do torture quests, but I was asked. Why was I asked? Well, the first way you could do it, you could explain it, is to say that it's an artistic statement showing how you're asked to do this one little thing. It's just one little guy you've got to torture, but that's just one step. And the plot of Wrath of the Lich King, he's got this bad guy who's Arthur, so he doesn't realise he's a bad guy because he keeps doing these little things that are minorly bad, but each one's slightly worse than the next, so it's incremental, and before he knows it, there he is, head of the undead. So he's doing these minorly bad things, but all the time thinking he's good. So it could be that by asking you to do this little quest, they're giving you an insight into what it must be like to be Arthur's. But if they do that, you've got to say it's happened. In the Zen's bidding, you do the bad thing, and then somebody comes along and points it out that it was bad within the game. Here, it doesn't happen. You do the bad thing, and you get points. There's no flagging, as we call it, at all. Which means that either the players don't notice that it's happened, or that they do notice it's happened and they think that the designer's a jerk. Another point, it could be a political point. They could be saying, this is just what's happening in the US. The US government is forbidden by their constitution to do torture. Many Americans don't see this as being an issue, but the US government takes its situation importantly, so they don't do torture. They ship the people they want tortured to countries that do torture, and it's called extraordinary rendition. And this is the same what kind of the Kirin Tor are doing. Hey, we're not allowed to torture this guy, but you can for us. Now, that's a valid political point being made in a game. However, if you do it, you've got to flag it. You've got to make sure that people know it's a political point and not just part of the general weave and waft of the game. Because otherwise, either people won't notice, or they will notice and think you're a jerk because you haven't pointed it out. Another possibility is that the designer wanted to make the game a darker theme. The game's been going a while. To keep interested in it, perhaps we should make it a bit more darker, make people get more edgier decisions that they have to do. Put new material in it. Again, this is justifiable. You can do that. But you've got to tell them about the changes up front so they can stop playing if it bothers them. And I certainly didn't know when I bought the Wrath of the Lich King that my character would be asked to torture people. And if I had known, maybe I wouldn't have played it. But at least if I'd been told, I would have known whether I could play it or not. And then you've got the fourth, which is the situation which normally applies, which is the designer didn't mark the quest as transgressing player expectations because the designer thought that they weren't. They thought that torture is just something that's fine. So why bother to flag it? You can do it anyway. We don't flag the fact that you can go off and kill people in the game. We just expect that. So why do torture when torture isn't anywhere near like that? Because it's wrong. The designer was wrong because I was expecting to have to do killing. I wasn't expecting to have to do torture. Torture is a lesser crime than killing, but then so's rape, and I don't expect to go raping anybody in there either. Either the designer didn't know what the players thought, or believed that torture wasn't something all that bad. Either way, the designer's a jerk. So my complaints, well, first of all, most players didn't notice this. Most players just played it and didn't give a second thought. Perhaps for them it wasn't an issue. They're just they don't think torture's bad. Perhaps they did register it, maybe subconsciously, but wanted to explore that part of their personality because it is a role-playing game and you are supposed to do things which you wouldn't normally do in order to explore how you would react to those things. The main reason, though, I suspect, is because they'd lost all sense of narrative. They just wanted to get to level 80 as quickly as possible. They're just going to do quests. They didn't even bother to read the text. They just said, what do I have to do? Zap that guy, 3 guys, bam, bam, bam. What do I do next? Go and collect the loot. What do I do next? That's all they were doing. That's probably why most people skipped it. You, when you were reading Harry Potter 7, did you notice that there was some torture in that? Unflagged? Harry Potter goes off and tortures somebody. Actually tortures them. Causes them pain until they tell him something, using this horrible spell. You didn't notice that, did you? You just want to get to the end of the flaming book. But he did. I wouldn't have noticed it because I never read the book. I only noticed it because Shami Chakrabarti, who's head of the UK's human rights organisation, pointed it out. He used some, I don't know, ex-cruci something or other, God knows what it is, but basically something he used on spiders before that wasn't very nice. He uses it on a person. But you didn't notice that, you just read through it because you wanted to get to the end of the book. But that's not how it should be. If he's done something really bad that he's been told is bad before and then he just does it, and this time it's okay. The Wrath of the Lich King's got some other problems in it as well. There's a quest called Tormenting the Soft Knuckles. This is hilarious. You go out and you kill baby gorillas until you anger the mother so much that she comes out of hiding to attack you. Then you kill her, which is what you really wanted to do. And then there's another one called Surrender Not, where you dress up in this comedy suit, waving a white flag, so you can run through pretending to be this Murloc, and it looks really hilarious. And you're waving a white flag until you get to the bad guy, and then, haha, it wasn't a white flag at all. That was just a ruse to trick you into letting me into your presence. What? So you're allowed to use a white flag like that? No, that's not a good thing, is it? Because if you're in a real war and somebody comes waving a white flag at you, you're going to shoot them. Huh, it's only a trick. Those are Afghans wearing those Iraqi suits. Some MMOs do have troublesome quests which fit the context, but they've been told in advance. You know before you play them that they've got those quests. I only mentioned the World of Warcraft. I've only mentioned 3 bad quests there out of 1,700 quests. Generally, it's good. I haven't got it in for World of Warcraft here. That's just where I happen to have found the one quest which caused me to get all the grief from millions of players who thought that I was a wimp. Some players will cheerfully assert it's just a game, and they'll say there is nothing the game will ask them to do which they won't do for experience points. So they do their most abhorrent idea of a sexual assault to a representation of the deity they worship. No, they wouldn't. You will not be taking Jesus up that jacksie, because there are some things which will shatter anybody's sense of it's just a game. Like with the darkroom sex game I mentioned a couple of hours ago, where it's all fun until you switch it for a child, and then it's not fun. It's just broken it. There are some things which, even if you get points in World of Warcraft for that, you're not going to do it. No matter what players say, there is always something which, if it were in the game, they wouldn't do it. Everybody has something which would shock them out of their immersion. And when you exit the frame of the magic circle, you exit the game. Once you're shocked out of the magic circle, you're shocked out of the game. The game's over for you. My complaint wasn't that I thought games shouldn't depict torture. My complaint was that it wasn't flagged. So it was a design issue. It wasn't a human rights issue. However, some people were genuinely very distressed by that quest, including one guy who'd actually been tortured in real life and was appalled to be asked to be doing it in a game rated 15. Well, don't play then isn't a defence, because it was too late. He'd already played and got this thing. Should have told him beforehand that it involved torture, then he wouldn't have played. Futuristic, this is the very last tier. Can non-humans have human rights? Suppose I created an MMO with very sophisticated non-player characters, so sophisticated you couldn't tell them from real people. Are they allowed human rights? They're not human, but they're intelligent. They may not even know they're artificial. They may think that they're real. They may think that they're living in a real world full of real people, and they can't recognize the real people who are wandering among them. You, for all you know, could be an AI in somebody's massively multiplayer game, and I could be an avatar of one of the designers. I think I'd probably know that if I were. Can you treat those NPCs inhumanely? Because that's why they were created. Can you torture them? They've got emotional reactions. They understand what's going on. They don't like it. But if you couldn't hurt them, you wouldn't have created them. They wouldn't even exist. Can you switch the machine off? Kill all the entire populace? Right, I've covered lots of issues here. Lots of issues where human rights come in with computer games. However, I would like to point out that none of these are heavyweight. Nobody is being held in detention without trial over this. These are all minor issues that happen a lot of times. Many smaller abuses are happening daily to thousands of people, but you could argue that none of them amount to anything if you can stop one guy who's a political prisoner from getting red-hot needles poked up his fingernails. What happens here, I've just described the situation. You can decide what your opinions are, because very little of this is actually decided. It's all up in the air. Is depicting human rights violations itself a human rights violation? See, you were promised that question at the beginning. I've asked it. Is it? Is to depict a human rights violation a human rights violation? Should it be? When shouldn't it be? There are a few guiding principles. Always remember it's players, not characters, that have the rights. The players could be the characters, but the characters don't have the rights. Only the players have the rights. Players who consent temporarily to give up a right so as to gain a greater benefit will not like it if do-gooders come along and try and protect them from themselves when they know perfectly well what they're doing. If I'm playing a game in which I abrogate my human rights, you can't come along and tell me that I'm not allowed to play it if I knew perfectly well what was happening there and it's only temporary and I can stop playing at any time. Surely. There is an implicit covenant between the designer and the players. The designer makes promises to the players which governs the shape of the magic circle and the frames which operate within. The line here, this is a quote from Wednesday Addams, which is why I showed you her picture. It's all fun and games until someone loses an eye. Then it's just fun. It's possible that asserting a right is self-defeating. If you assert a right to preach in a strong role-playing game, then that would eventually close it. If I was allowed to go into a game and tell everybody that Jesus was coming and they were playing a game and it was all where everybody was pretending to be a fish, they wouldn't like that, they would stop playing, then I've got a right to preach to an empty game. Therefore, my right to preach has become an empty right, therefore why was I given it in the first place? Because I've not got any right at the end of it that I had at the big, I've not got any right at the end of it that I didn't not have at the beginning. Yeah. Let's hope I can. That doesn't look quite so stupid on playback. So ask why a human right exists before you mindlessly apply it. It's not that these things are absolute, they are relative. I've spoken about games here. A lot of what I've said applies to simulations and social worlds like Second Life, not just games. Don't assume that games are unique. Don't assume that everything you say about games only applies to games. A lot of it applies to things like film, theatre, interpretive dance. Right. Very end slide, you'll be pleased to hear. There was an early text game called Myst, very early, like 1981. It was run by a tyrannical administrator. All the time, he would delete, imprison characters, destroy their properties, ban the players, insult them, arbitrarily and on a whim. If you played that game, you could log in the next day, find your character didn't exist. You could log in the next day, find out you had ultimate godlike powers. Log in the next day, you find your character did exist, but the sex had changed. All sorts of things could happen on a whim, arbitrarily. The players loved it. They liked it. That was part of the game. The game itself wasn't really interesting. It was only because there was this sort of gaming the guy who ran it to try and get things to happen to your enemies that made it fun. That's why it was fun. People loved it, the people who played it. So you should be allowed to have that kind of thing. Maybe, shouldn't you? Should a game like Myst be allowed? Does it break too many human rights? What human rights does it break at all? Luckily here, you're the experts, not me. I'm just telling you what the issues are, and you get to decide. And that's it, only 20 minutes too late. Well, I'm gonna hang around for questions.
Many thanks. It was a lot of very, very complicated issues. And we will actually, through this course, oh my God, we will actually, through this course, disseminate and analyze Professor Bartle's lecture, because it brings up so many issues. It brings up really what is human rights. I mean, in short, human rights is about being free and equal, having the right to your body and property, and don't mix them up, and also to be able to live your life as a dignified human being. This is very simple, but it's extremely complex at the same time. And during this course, we will analyze the human rights issues in the real world, in the half-real world, as Jesper Juhl is talking about. And actually, Jesper Juhl is also being one of the lecturers here in this course. We will disseminate human rights issues in the virtual world, and we will also see what it's about when we are immersed. And I hope you will take part of the course, and it will start next week. And we will, for those who couldn't apply or now want to apply, we will contact you next week for application procedures. Thank you very much. No questions, but a lot of things to think about.
Yes.
And once again, thank you, Professor Bartle.
You're
And I
welcome.
hope we can come back to you during the time of the course now and then
Yeah.
to hear your views on our discussions.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry for trapping you for so long.